we'll be looking at loop. Right. So in this lecture, in the previous lessons, we'll look at the conditional if. Right. We'll look at the nested if, and then in this lecture, we're going to be looking at loop. And we're going to look at the for loop and the while loop, and also the nested loops. Right. So now the loop allows repeating a block of code multiple times. Right. So for loop iterates over a sequence of list, tuple, string, or range. Right. Then the while loop executes a block of code as long as a condition is true. So we're going to be learning this, I'm going to be learning this. So now let's go back to our Visual Studio Code. Right? So now let's assume that we have this is a list, right? So we have a variable called n that holds this list, which this list has items of 4, 6, 7, and 9, right? So we have 4 items here, right? What I'm going to do here is let's assume that we want to loop through this list, right? We want to loop through this list and then bring out the values located in this list here, right? Remember that in this list here, 4 is located in index 0, 6 is located in index 1, 7 is located in index 2, and 9 is located in index 3. Now to loop through this, what you just need to do is to use the for loop for I in range. Now this range is an inbuilt function, right? This range is an inbuilt function. So for now, I say for I in the range of 0 down to the length of the n. It means that now what this means is what it means is this. It means that this I is a variable, and I'm saying that I should start from 0 down to the length of n. Now the length of n is this, and this is n, and n holds this list, right? Now this list has 4 items, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So the length of n is 4, which means that I will go 4 times, right? So if I go 4 times, and I start from 0, so it becomes I equal to 0, I equal to 1, I equal to 2, and I equal to 3, which is 4 times 1, 2, 3, 4. That is what it's saying here. So for I in range of 0 down to the length of n, then print print n I. So this is to print the values located in indexes, okay? So in the first iteration here, when I is 0, right? So it prints what? 4. That is ni, means n0. So it means when I is 0. When I is 0, then it will print n of I, which is equal, which gives you what? Which gives you 4. Then when I is 1, it will print ni, which is n1, right? So it's n1, and this one is n0, which this one will give you what? This will give you 6. So when I is 2, it will print n2, which this will give you what? 7. So when I is 3, it will print n3, which will give you what? Which will give you 9. So now this is what the answer will be. So the answer will become 4, 6, 7, and 9. So if I run this, right? So if I run this test.py test.py, so the answer will give me 4, 6, 7, and 9, and this is what happens, right? Now, what if I want to use the while loop to do this, right? What if I want to use the while loop to do this? What I will need to do here is to set I, right? To set I equal to 0. Then I will say while I is less than, right? Because I equal to 0. So while I is less than the length of n, if you check the rule here by default, I in the initial stage, I is set to 0, and I is less than the length of n because the length of n is 4, right? So it means that y0 is less than 4, right? Y0 is less than 4, what happens? It means print n I. Then when 0 is less than 4, when I print ni, it means it will, at first instance in the while loop, it will print n equals to 0, right? So you need to increment I plus equal to 1. You need to increment it by 1. So when you increment it by 1, I becomes 1 and it goes again into the while loop and I what? Prints 1. It goes again, then I, if you increment, let's do this. So what this while loop means, what the while loop means is this. Now in the first instance, I is set to 0, right? So in this row here, the while loop is said when I is less than length of n. And in the first instance here, I is 0, so it means 0 is less than n, which is true, right? 0 is less than n, which is true. So it means that, so 0 is less than 4 because length of n is 4, right? So 0 is less than 4, which is true. So it will print, n0, which gives you what? N0, which becomes what? N0 is 4, right? Now it will now increment I by 1, which I will now be 0 plus 1, which gives you what? 1, right? So I becomes 1 again. So it comes to a loop. It comes to a loop again. Now he said when 1 is less than 4, which is true, right? When 1 is less than 4, which is true, it will print n1, right? Which gives you what? 6. So it comes again the while loop, which gives you 6. So the I will be, remember is now 1, right? So it will be 1 plus 1, which gives you what? 2. Now it comes again and do the same thing when 2 is less than 4, which is true, right? Which is true. So it will print n2. It will print n2, which gives you what? 7. So the new I will be 2 plus 1, which gives you what? 3. Which gives you 3. So here it comes when 3 is less than 4, which is true, it will print n3, which gives you what? So n3, which gives you what? N3 gives me 9, right? So n3 gives me 9. So it comes again to the while loop here. So becomes what? So the new I becomes what? The new I becomes what? 3 plus 1. 3 plus 1, which becomes 4. Right? So now when 4 is less than 4, when 4 is less than 4, which is false, so the iteration stops. So the answer will be 4, 6, 7, and 9, right? So that is how the while loop works. So if I were to run this, now, right? So let me remove the first print here. Let me remove this for loop so that you will see what happens. 4, 6, 7, and 9, right? Using the while loop. So you can see now you understand how to use the while loop, and how to use the for loop, right? So it depends on whichever one you want to use, right? Or both loop through the list. You can look through list, you can look through dictionary, you can look through tuples, right? But this we are working mainly on list because most of the problems we'll be solving is a list, right? And dictionary. So now let's look further. Let's solve another problem. So now, because we're still in just one single loop, right? So now let's assume that we want to find a number. We want to find a number in this list. Let's assume we want to find a number in this list. So what this algorithm does is we need to loop through this list and then compare this target number one after the other until we find where the target number is located. Right? Now what I'll be doing here, I'll be using the while loop and also be using the for loop to solve this problem. Okay, now let's solve it. So now why the I is less than n, right? Remember we said we should print this. So in order to solve this problem, we need to apply two rules, the loops and the conditional if. So the conditional if will aid us to compare each one after the other, each of the values located in these indexes, one after the other, what the while loop will enable us to loop through. So now this first loop is while the I is less than n, which is starting from I equal to 0, right? So we're looking for a target number, and then so here I will apply the if condition here in the while loop. So if our target, right, if our target is equal to n of r, which means that if our target is equal to the first one here, if our target is equal to 4, right? So print, so print, I would say, so print the target number is located in index I, right? So now the computer will not see this value I, so you need to write format here. So it will definitely say it. So now let's solve this together, right? So before we run this, let's solve this together. Now, why the I is less than n? So at first instance is 0, right? 0 is less than 4, which is true. So this, then it will perform this conditional if. So if the target, which the target is, so if the target is 7, right? The target is 9, okay? If 9 is equal to, so the value located in index 0 is 4. If 9 is equal to 4, right, then print the target number is located in index this, right? So this is false. So this is false. It will actually skip this because we didn't apply, we didn't put the X to show that this is false. So we'll do that later. So let's learn this first. So now it comes to I equal to 1 when I will be, so now I will be 0 plus 1. So I will increment by 1 here, right? I increment by 1 here. So it will now be when when 1 is less than 4, which is true. So it will do this. So it will do this. So 1 becomes what? Index, which is 6, which is 9 equal to 6, which is false. Right? So it comes into here, I becomes 2, right? So it means 2 is less than 4, which is true. So it will do this, which becomes what? 9 is 9 equal to 7. So it's false. 9 is not equal to 7. So this is false, right? So it comes again, increment by 1, and it comes again here, which is I will be 2 plus 1, right, which is 3. So when 3 is less than 4, which is true, it will print what? And so it will fetch out the value located in index 3. So the value located in index 3 is 9, right? So is 9 equal to 9, which is true. 9 is equal to 9, which is true. So it will print out, so this will print out the target number is located in index 3, right? So it comes here, increment by 4. 4 is not less than 4, which is 4, as the iteration stops, right? So now if I were to run this, so the target number is located in index 3. So that is what we did here, right? So you can see how programming is very, very, very simple. So now what if we want to use for loop to do this, right? What if we want to use for loop to do this? Now to use for loop to do this, so for I, right, in the range of starting from 0 down to the length of n, right? Down to the length of n. So perform the same operation. So when it loops through, it says therefore then if the target is equal to the ni, right? If the target is equal to the ni, so what happens? You have to print the target number is located in index I, which we use format here. Now you can see what happens, right? So you can see the difference between the for loop and the while loop. Now you it's left for you to choose which one to use. Or most times to do combine them together to solve some problems, right? You can see. So this one, once we run this one to it will still give us the same answer, right? You can see that the while loop, when it runs through a condition, right, it increments. But this by default, it's all by default, the for loop, when it runs when I equal to 0, by default, it runs I equal to 1, I equal to 2, and so on until it gets to make sure that I doesn't exceed the total number of iterations here, right? But this, you have to increment it, and there's a condition here in the while loop to check, to stop the iteration, to make sure that I doesn't exceed the total number of lengths that we have here, right? You can see that the iteration is decided in the for loop here, right? It means that here the range function decided the total number of iterations, which means that length of n goes through 4 times. But here in the while loop, right, there's a decision here that decides the total number of iteration, which means I is less than length of n. So it means that I must be length of n to perform these conditions here, right? So you can see when an I is incrementing, after the condition I increments, after the condition I increments until I is not less than n, length of n, then it stops the iteration, right? So you can see the two, how the two works, right? So now let's do another problem. Let's solve another problem. So now let's assume that we want to look for the maximum number. We want to find the maximum number here. So what do we do? Now to find the maximum number here, right? We need a for loop or we need a while loop to find the maximum number. Now you have to think, so what do I do? Now computer is dummy. Computer doesn't understand the maximum number, right? Because we are doing two things here. I want to find the maximum number. After we've done that, we'll also find the minimum number, right? So computer is dummy, doesn't understand how to find, they don't understand the largest number here. Now you as a human, you as a developer, you need to think of algorithm to write in order for the computer to understand the maximum number in a list. Now let's get started. Now let's assume, right, that the maximum number is located in the first index here, right? So I will call my maximum number. I'll call my maximum number. I'll pass n. So I'll pass 4. Means that the maximum, this variable maximum number is holding 4 or is assigned as 4 at first instance, right? So now for I is equal to 0. So instead of me comparing this by itself, right? So I will just start from I equal to 1 down to the length of n. So what this first line means is, it means that normally the length of n is 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So normally it's supposed to be I equal to 0, I equal to 1, I equal to 2, and I equal to 3, right? Supposed to be I equal to 0, I equal to 1, I equal to 2, and I equal to 3, right? So what happens here is, now we are saying for I in the range of this, so it means that I is starting from 1 down to the length of n, which means that we are skipping I equal to 0, so it means that this iteration will go 3 times, right? So when I equal to 1, what happens, right? When I equal to 1, what happens? It means that we're trying to use the conditional if to find the maximum number. So we're comparing this. So if the maximum number is greater, no, let me use lesser. If the maximum number is lesser, if the maximum number is lesser than n of I, right, it means that now, if it's lesser than n of I, it means that we're finding the maximum number which is greater than this. We are finding a new number which is greater than the maximum number. So what happens is to store the new number, in this. So you are assigning the new number to this variable max now, right? You're assigning it, right? That's what happens here. So once it's done, then I'll say the maximum number the maximum number is, oh, sorry, the maximum number is, so here this is to fetch out the number. I'll put this and square bracket this. So this will bring out the maximum number. Now the reason why I'm going out of the loop, right? The reason why I'm going out of the loop is after it has done this, right? The loop stops and then it prints the new, it will print the new maximum number. Sorry, it's not n of I, it will print the new maximum number. So that's why I'm going out of the loop, right? To print the new maximum number. So now what happens here is when I equal to 1, right? So the condition is when I equal to 1, so the condition is if the mass number is 4, right? So if 4 is less than, now the n of I, remember n of I becomes n of 1, right? Which is, the n of 1 is 6, right? Is 6, which means is 4 less than 6. Now since 4 is not less than 6, right? Since 4 is not less than 6, this become true. So the new maximum number, becomes what? 6. Right? New mass number, because we are assigning the new mass number to the, we are assigning 6 to the, 6 becomes the new mass number, right? So now it comes again when I becomes 2, right? When I becomes we're within the iteration here, within the for loop. So when I becomes 2, now it means is, sorry, when I becomes 2, it means is, so n2 is 0, 1, 2, n2 is 7. So it means is the mass number is 6, right? Is 6 less than 7, right? So this is true. The new mass number becomes what? The new mass number becomes 7. So when I becomes 3, right? So it means you pick out the number, the value of the item located in index 3, which is 9. So it's 7, which is a new mass number. Is 7 less than 9? Now 7 is less than 9, which is true. This is true. So the new mass number becomes what? The new mass number becomes what? 9. So now this will bring out the new mass number will be 9. So if I'm to bring this one, so let me remove this while loop. So if I'm to print this one, so the answer will give us what? 9. The mass number is 9. So that is what we have analyzed, and that is how computer processes this task, right? That is, I remember computer has done, will feed this information. I will know that this information will give us 9 because we've analyzed the information, we have evaluated it, and we're saying that 9 is the answer, right? Now, what if we want to do minimum number, right? But before we do this, let's try to use a while loop. Let's try to use a while loop. So now to use the while loop, we have a variable called I, which is equal to 0, right? So now say why I is less than the length of why I is less than the length of n, right? So what happens here is we have to perform condition, and the if the so in the same way we use a I is equal to this, and the mass num is equal. Okay, we already have the mass num declared here, so let's declare here. So if the mass num, if the mass num is less than the ni, right, is less than ni, so what happens is you swap the new mass number with ni, right? You swap it, so the new mass number becomes what? The ni, right? And then make sure after the if you are incrementing I plus equal to 1, right? So once it does this one in increments, once it does this one increment, so what we just explained here is what we did here, right? So then after the while loop, after it has done that, right? So it will print out the new mass number. So if I'm to remove this one now, let's remove this for loop. Let's remove this for loop here. So if I run this, it will still give me the same answer. The new mass number is 9 for the while loop. You can see what happens, right? Remember, I've explained why the while loop is incrementing, right? And I've already explained why we don't need increment in the for loop because by default it's incrementing. You can see what happens, right? So to me, the for loop is more easier than the while loop, right? Because it's shorter. So the while loop you have to be very careful and you need to understand the while loop, right? Why using it. But you can see what I did in the for loop, I also did it in the while loop, right? So now what if we want to do the minimum number? All I just need to do is to change the sign here. So let me change the sign and let's see. Remember the sign is less than, so let's just get it down. So let's say the minimum number. So let's try and see. Now you can see we've changed the sign and the minimum number becomes what 4. So that is how it works, right? So you can see that programming is very, very simple. You just need to do is understand the rules, understand the algorithm because computing is all about algorithm. Once you understand how to write good algorithm, then you can be a better developer, right? Because there's a difference between a coder and a problem solver. So once you can be able to know how to write good algorithm to solve a problem, it doesn't take you time to write good code, right? Because you can then think how to do that and then imagine that because one you don't cram code. All you just need to do is to understand the steps, right? To understand the technique and then apply it, right? So that is what every computer student should do and every computer student must know. That's why you guys are learning that structure and algorithm because every coding interview you go to, most of the questions are all in data structures and algorithms, right? Most of them are all in data structure, most, right? I'm not saying that all, but based on my experiences in programming, most of the interviews I've went to that involve programming, they are all data structure and algorithm. So because they assume that once you can write a good algorithm, you can actually be a good developer. So thank you and God bless you. So in the next lecture, we're going to be looking at the outer. We are going to be looking at the quadratic uh, loop, where we have the inner loop and the outer loop and the inner loop. Right, that's what we'll explain in the next class. So thank you and God bless you. Right. So there's one thing I still need to let you guys know here. Right. So remember that we are looping forward, forward, forward. So what if we want to loop backward? Right. All you just do is to do. Okay, I will do that in the next class because all you just need to do is to change the sign here to minus, so it's like decrementing, right? So I'll do that in the next class. Right, thank you and God bless you.